Okay, so I'm going to draw your attention to the, we're just going to finish up the Paradiso, because I didn't get to the end, and that seems to me wrong on so many levels, not to get to paradise when looking at Dante's poem. I wanted to avert your attention again to the whole geography, which I just think it's sort of helpful visually, of the Inferno, the Purgatorio and the Paradiso. You see hell leading through to Mount Purgatory on the other side, and then from that, moving further up and further in all the way to the Paradiso. And I wanted to draw, Dante's poem has been so powerful in its imaginative effect that I think there is a tendency to think, and I think this is misapprehension on our part, and our materialism, to misunderstand, and the visual image doesn't help with this to some degree, what he's trying to say and about the movement and the structure and so forth. What he is not saying is that heaven is an immaterial, airy-fairy, light, insubstantial reality, whereas hell is a corporeal, bodily, heavy place, which we might think with our the sense of gravity that we have, and the materialism that's ensued to some degree from Isaac Newton's experiments. Since the 18th century, we talk about gravity as the weight, the tendency of all things when you drop them to fall to the earth. We call that the law of gravity. And you have a sense of weight and substance being connected to material, that material weight, and the tendency for things to go down in that sense. And by that token, then, the earth would be a substantial, heavy, real place, and heaven, which is above us, would be the opposite of that, would be airy, insubstantial, and less real as a consequence. And God, imaginatively speaking, would be the least substantial, the least real of all beings. And yet that's not how Dante sees it, and I want to address that misapprehension, which I think actually comes to some degree from the power of his imagination and the way he constructs it, and the idea of moving upwards as going to a place that's less real than what's down here, because that's the bias of modernity, is that what happens here and now is real and empirically verifiable, and science demonstrates it, so it's true, and those things that are not empirically verifiable are ipso facto not knowable by reason or by science. And therefore God is a postulate which maybe we will emotionally attach ourselves to, but we can't rationally understand, and it's the postulate of blind faith. So goes the argument. That's not how Dante is constructing this at all, because he understands that there is a sort of a gravity that reigns in the universe, but the gravity and the center of the gravity is God himself, and things are drawn to him. And he is the heaviest entity in the entire cosmos. Everything is directed towards him by love. Love directs and pulls things towards him. Everything that's good and true and beautiful is drawn towards him like filings are drawn to a magnet. They're made that way until sin twists and distorts them and directs them downwards into the bowels of the earth. And a good illustration of this is the thing that seems to our sight to be the least substantial in some ways, or at least the lightest of things, the thing that gives the light, namely the sun. The sun seems not to be, it emanates light. Light we can see by the light, but is it something that we can grasp? Does it have any heaviness? And the answer is normally no. That like, at least by common sense, it would not make sense that light has any weight. But the sun, in fact, and I'm talking now about the real sun, the sun that lights the skies during the day, is in fact the heaviest body in the entire solar system. It's the densest. The hydrogen which comprises of it is compressed. It's so heavy, a pail of it, you couldn't lift it. The strongest man in the world could not lift a pail of that compressed hydrogen. And the sun is an analogy. It's just an analogy for the weight, the heaviness of God and the weight of glory. And I think when Dante is thinking about God and things being drawn up to him, towards him by love, he's thinking of God not in insubstantial terms, just because it's up in the air or beyond the air, but rather the exact opposite. What's down here is, like the psalmist says, or it says it's hevel, it's like a puff of wind, it's a vanity. That's what Ecclesiastes says. Whereas God is, and again Hebraic, is chavod. He's heavy, he's solid, he's real, he's holy. The holiness of God has a heaviness to it, and a substance that's not broken or decomposed by the processes of entropy which reign on earth. This is why things break down, why rust and moth can destroy things here on earth, because even though they seem substantial, in fact they fall apart and they don't last. And that includes people, it includes empires, it includes anything we build. It's not built to last. The marketing is lying to you when it said it's built to last. It's built to last a bit longer, but it's not built to last. It's not going to be eternal, but God is eternal. So Dante has these things in mind, and when he projects Dante moving upwards, there's a sense where he's moving into a more solid, more real, and to him almost painful ascent. He can't get near it because he is, by comparison, nothing. And you need to recover that. C.S. Lewis tries to do it in a book. I don't know if you've read it, but you should sometime. The Great Divorce, and he's addressing the modern misapprehension of how heaven is an intellectual idea, but it's not real. Dante has a strong sense, and he expresses it in the poem, that it is the most real place, whereas this life is, in a sense, the most fleeting of all things. And for some reason, we believe, the moderns, that death is something that just naturally comes and is more real than God. The whole of Scripture speaks against it. Dante speaks against it as well here. And he presents the end of the Inferno, the Paradiso, with the portrait of a rose window. Now, I said to you last time, in a medieval cathedral, in this particular period, often they're built into the end of the grand cathedral. When you look in, you are looking, yes, towards a stained glass window, but the stained glass window portrays either the Trinity, or here the Virgin Mother and the Christ child at the center of it, in the midst of what is often a series of probably the apostles or saints or angels, and there's concentric circles building out from that. And that is what you will behold one day. It's presenting pictorially what Scripture says is at the center of all reality, the place towards which our loves are inclining us, because of the gravity of not just the incarnation, but there's a resurrection and the ascension. He goes up. Jesus goes up because love is drawing him back up. It drew him down so that he might become man, and now it's drawing him back up so he will be fully with God, and one day he will come down again to bring us up with him. That's how it's portrayed. Now, I think the visual imagery, it can be, and our sense of gravity and the defiance of gravity and the reality of the solid and the sense of reality, they've broken. The imaginative framework has been broken. And it needs to be recovered to some degree for people to appreciate this, because most of us are very visual. We think with our feelings. And our feelings are that God's not real, because we can't see him. So you need to, in a sense, Dante helps us. He heals our imaginations here on this. At any rate, this is what Dante sees in Paradiso, Canto 30. Perhaps 6,000 miles away from us, the sixth hour burns, and now our world inclines its shadow to an almost level bed, so that the span of heaven high above begins to alter so, and that some stars are no longer to be seen from our deep earth. That's how high up he is. And as the brightest handmaid of the sun advances, heaven shuts off one by one its lights until the loveliest is gone, because the closer to the sun you are, the less bright the others are. Now it's just the brightness of the sun. He can't find any better comparison. I mean, it is just an analogy. But how bright is the presence of God? It's brighter than the sun. And every other light then fades by comparison. It's light. We call it light pollution. We live in the cities. This isn't light pollution. It's light cleansing. This is a light that cleanses any sense of refracted loves expressed in the stars. So did the triumph that forever plays around the point that overcame me. Point that seemed enclosed by that which it encloses, fade away gradually from my sight, so that my seeing nothing else and love compelled my eyes to turn again to Beatrice. And remember, this is Canto 30, just as Virgil left his sight in Canto 30 when he turned to Beatrice, now he turns to Beatrice, and what does he see? If that which has been said of her so far were all contained within a single praise, it would be it would be much too scant to serve me now. The loveliness I saw surpassed not only our human measure, and I think that surely only its maker can enjoy it fully. I yield. I am defeated at this passage more than a comic or a tragic poet has ever been by a barrier in his theme. For like the sun that strikes the frailest eyes, so does the memory of her sweet smile deprive me of the use of my own mind. From that first day, when in this life I saw her face, until I had this vision, no thing ever cut the sequence of my song. But now I must desist from this pursuit in verses of her loveliness, just as each artist who has reached his limit must. So she, in beauty, as I leave her to a herald that is greater than my trumpet, which nears the end of its hard theme, with voice and bearing of a guide whose work is done, began again. From matter's largest sphere, we now have reached the heaven of pure light, light of the intellect, light filled with love, love of true good, love filled with happiness, a happiness surpassing every sweetness. Here you will see both ranks of paradise, and it overcomes him, and he no longer looks to Beatrice, but looks to the thing that she resembled in her loveliness, in her beauty, in the thing that inspired his verse his whole life. It's not erotic love. Don't think of it in a carnal sense. She represented ideal beauty to him, but now he sees ideal beauty. It's like at the end of the last battle in Narnia, when the children pass through the little stable, and they go through this stable and enter into the true Narnia. And they say the reason that we love the old Narnia is because it reminded us of this place. And so come on, children, Aslan cries, further up and further in. So it's that same vision, and Lewis is obviously leaning on Dante in that portrait here of our physical world being like a mirror, but it's a shadowy mirror. It's not a perfect image, but now we will see God face to face, and everything that we loved has pointed us just to this, and we will forget about those things. We will look only to Christ. We will look only to God. We will praise him, because everything that we used to praise was actually just an anticipation of this object of praise. So that's how he portrays this at the end. So it's not that it's just when it says intellectual, it means everything in us that seems right is now found in this. Don't think of it abstract. Again, we import our idea of reason as an abstract, dispassionate process. It's a rational faith. It's a passionate, rational faith. Everything in him is drawn like an iron filing towards a magnet here. He finds his completion in it. Intoxicated with odor, there's a stream and the high desire. And she adds this, the river and the gems of topaz entering and leaving in the grasses laughter. These are shadowy prefaces of their truth. Not that these things are lacking in themselves. The defect lies in you, whose sight is not yet that sublime. So it's like the milk and the meat. Now we're getting the meat. You're no longer going to be satisfied with the milk, because now we have the real thing. Anyway, it's just a magnificent passage towards the end of it. And let me come back to Canto 33 of Paradiso. So I'll deal with the final bit of the text here. Praises the Virgin, and because she is the one who encouraged Beatrice to call Dante to begin with. There was 3 ladies: Saint Lucia, the Lady of Light. Luce is light. Saint Lucy, Beatrice, and the Virgin Mary, and all of them represent idealized beauty. And they have called Dante. Dante is a poet who loved beauty. His verse is renowned for its beauty. The beauty of Dante is the beauty that adorns the city of Florence and the art that inspires it. And now it draws him towards what it was an image of, just like on the remember the fresco inside the cathedral in Florence points to a city. The city is actually just a correspondence to the heavens. It's an anticipation of that. It's meant to be, at any rate. This is the great charter of art for Christians, is we're approximating or trying to draw people to a beauty that actually we can only faintly represent. And yet by doing so, we draw them to love the good and the true as well as the beautiful. At any rate, we can easily misapprehend that when we come at it from modern vantage point, which we all do, because we live in this age. That's how it's portrayed over and over and over again. This is the benefit of reading something written from a very different worldview. But I'm not going to continue on here because I'm cutting into my other time. I just wanted you to note at the end of all this, he prays to eternal light. You only dwell within yourself. So this is not a physical light. It's a spiritual light which is brighter than the physical light that he's seen ever. You only dwell within yourself, and only you know you. Self-knowing, self-known, you love and smile upon yourself. That circle which begotten so appeared in you as light reflected, within itself and colored like itself, to me seemed painted with our effigy. It seemed to have a human form. He thought he saw a man in the midst of all that, because God has taken on human flesh. And now when we look at God, we see that actually the smiling face that we smile with smiled back at us. There was something recognizable in God that we didn't know would be there. God is now smiling upon us in an effigy. And so that my sight was set on it completely. And now he tries to describe what he's portraying here. Almost impossible, as the geometer intently seeks to square the circle, but he cannot reach through thought on thought the principle he needs. So I searched that strange sight. I wished to see the way in which our human effigy suited the circle and found place in it. And my own wings were far too weak for that. But then my mind was struck by light that flashed, and with this light received what it had asked. So it's a vision given to him. He can't describe it. He couldn't attain it. It's a vision he's given to. And at that point, here force failed my high fantasy. But my desire and will were moved already like a wheel revolving uniformly by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. And so this third canticle concludes with the very same word that concludes the other two as well. So the stars, representations of the way in which God from above moves everything down below and influences it in accordance with his good and perfect will. Unless it perverts itself and inclines itself downwards away from him, he moves the vision that started the whole poem when he was lost in the forest. Comments or questions? I've taken 20. Yes?
I don't want to get into too much of a theology discussion, but do you think that he was inspired by the old idea of like the heavens, like multiple heavens?
He talks a little bit about that. He talks about the third heaven and so forth in Paul's epistle, when he talks about having been taken up to a third heaven. And C.S. Lewis also expands on that when he writes his sci-fi novel Paralandra. And that's the realm of Venus. Anyway, this is an imaginative attempt. What does it mean, the third heaven? What exactly does that mean? Does it actually have in mind these spheres here? So there's the Earth, the first, the second, the third. Venus, is he really there? And can you go further up beyond Saturn to the crystalline spheres? Well, it's mentioned, lest you think this is just a Catholic idea, it's mentioned in evangelical hymnody into the 19th century, the music of the spheres, etc. It doesn't go away. There might be theological differences on certain very core key issues, but the whole worldview does not just disappear. It's held on to because it has potency. It explains the beauty of music, among other things. And now that we've lost that sense of the beauty of music, and music is now something different, we have trouble recognizing what they're talking about, the fact that our music has a divine quality. Everyone loves music. I've never met anyone who didn't like music. They may disagree about music, but they disagree passionately about music because it matters to them. They might split in their churches over music, precisely because they believe it's not just subjective preference, there's something worth fighting for here. Anyway, I don't know. Answer to your question. Not exactly sure, but he does talk about, yes, this is, he goes up past the Venus though and goes on and up, up and up and up and up. To the point where at the end he is in the crystalline sphere. Now I'm going to come back to this in a couple of weeks when we looked at John Donne and his poem, the 16th century Anglican writer. Donne also refers to this cosmology, and I'll leave that until that time. Any other comments, questions? If not, I'm going to move on to Beowulf.